Now you're probably thinking, how much material from the book could they have possibly left out of this? The Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King is easily the longest movie in the trilogy, with the theatrical cut standing at a whopping 201 minutes and the extended edition coming out to over 4 hours long. Wow, that is really blurring the line between a movie and a miniseries. But you may be surprised to hear that, like with its predecessors, I believe that the extended edition of The Return of the King is the superior version. To any skeptics out there, I direct you to the confrontation at Isengard. Unlike the theatrical version, this scene actually offers some satisfying closure for the primary villain of the Two Towers. Having Saruman die on one of the machines that he built is a wonderfully fitting end for the fallen wizard. Plus, you've got to admit that it's good to see Christopher Lee one last time in the trilogy. However, one section that didn't even make the extended edition was the Scouring of the Shire, a chapter in which Saruman and Wormtongue take over the Shire, forcing Frodo and his friends to lead a Hobbit resistance against them. Again, this works in the book as an example of Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin taking charge in the face of the war coming to their doorstep. But think about it in the film. Taking away the fact that it would add yet another ending for people to complain about, this chapter's inclusion would add an extra climax that would feel underwhelming compared to everything else. We have the battle at the Black Gate with the heroes knowing that they have no chance of winning. At the same time, Frodo, Sam, and Gollum are at the crack of doom as the fate of the ring and the world hang in the balance. We would then go from that to a much smaller conflict instead of winding down, catching our breath, and coming to terms with the peace that follows Sauron's destruction. Aside from that, there are relatively minor changes, like Pippin befriending Faramir instead of Beregond, who is nowhere to be seen. I accept this in the same way as when they swapped out Glorfindel for Arwen in The Fellowship of the Ring. It creates fewer characters to remember and gives more development to the ones who are there. If I had to complain about one aspect of the movie though, I would criticize how the Battle of the Pelennor Fields ends. In the book, although the Oathbreakers do help against the Corsairs of Umbar, Aragorn and company show up to the main conflict with an army of living reinforcements. In the film, as soon as the army of the dead shows up, the battle is pretty much over with little to no strategy. In the context of the story, there was really nothing that this particular skirmish could add to the narrative at this point, so it made sense from a film perspective to end it there. However, a battle this large would have logically called for more strategy instead of quickly being resolved by an invincible army. Although some of you may disagree, the final major change that I feel bears addressing is the actual destruction of the ring, which the film portrays as Frodo and Gollum fighting over it before tumbling over the edge. In the book, Gollum is overjoyed at having finally reclaimed his precious. In fact, he is so gleefully energetic that he slips and falls into the lava. Again, this works on the page as Gollum's object of obsession finally becoming his undoing. It also works as a source of irony, as a character who has constantly tried to take the ring from the heroes and jeopardize the mission accidentally ends up saving the world. On the screen, this would be extremely difficult to film in a way that doesn't feel anticlimactic. You want to see Frodo and Sam come out on top. After seeing all of the struggles that they have overcome, not to mention the war that the other characters have been fighting, you might feel a little cheated if it all came down to an accident. In fact, if it was put in the wrong hands, this scene could almost be played as a source of comedy. Like with the other movies, most of the changes made in translating The Return of the King to film don't bother me. While you could make an argument of implausibility when it comes to some of the battles and how they end, just take into consideration that this is a movie with trolls, orcs, elves, dwarves, and magic. I think that you can let some things go. At its core, The Return of the King is meant to be the grand finale of Tolkien's fantasy epic, with the stakes at their highest and the situations at their most desperate. The film version accomplishes that, which is good enough for me.